sad news. Salt Lake City police tell us a 21-year-old woman named LaShawn Denise Bagley was arrested on suspicion of murder. Police say she and Ouncie Mitchell had been in a relationship. Take a look. The pro bull rider and Fort Bend County native had just come off a win in Iowa and was in Salt Lake City for the Utah State Fair. In fact, police say he was staying with Bagley.
He's a nice person.
Laquita Allen is his mother, still trying to process the loss of her only son.
This tragedy is very unexpected. We expected him to die by the bull, not by the bullets.
Police in Salt Lake City say Ouncie was shot and killed early Monday morning at this apartment complex where he'd been staying with a female friend while in town for the Utah State Fair. Apparently, Ouncie came to collect his things after a dispute when she's accused of shooting him.
I really don't know the details. I don't want to know the details. My only thing is getting my son home.
The night the bullets flew was supposed to be one of celebration. Demetrius Omar Latif Allen, known to the professional bull riding world as Ouncie Mitchell, had just stepped out of the bright lights of the Utah State Fair arena. The dirt still clung to his boots, and the adrenaline of another ride still pulsed through his veins. He'd done what he loved that day, what he had been born to do, and the cheers of the crowd echoed in his mind. But hours later, that sound would be replaced by the deafening crack of gunfire, shattering everything he had built in 27 short years. His mother would later put her grief into words no parent should ever have to speak. I expected him to die by the bull, not by the bullet. It was a sentence that carried both the pride of his dangerous calling and the shock of how abruptly it had all ended. For Laquita Allen, her only son wasn't supposed to be claimed by violence in the stillness of a Salt Lake City night. He was supposed to grow older, ride longer, and keep teaching his 4-year-old daughter about life from the back of a bucking bull. Before we take you deep into the events that led from glory in the arena to tragedy in the night, I want to invite you to be part of our community. We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers, and every single click helps us bring more stories like this to light. If you love true crime told with care and detail, hit that subscribe button now so you never miss a case that deserves to be heard. Ouncie had always been more than just a name on a scoreboard. Small in frame but enormous in spirit, he carried himself with quiet confidence, the kind that made people listen when he spoke and watch when he walked into a room. In the arena, he was fearless. Away from it, he was thoughtful, calm, and rooted in the values his father had drilled into him. Respect the animal, respect your word, outwork everyone. The road to that moment in Utah had begun decades earlier, far from the Wasatch Mountains, under the sun-baked skies of Texas. From the time he could walk, he was drawn to the rodeo. At just 2 years old, he was strapped onto the back of a sheep in a mutton-busting contest. By 5, he was riding steers, gripping the rope with tiny hands, but with the grit of a grown man. Falling off didn't scare him. Letting go did. That determination ran in the family. His father was a working cowboy who'd faced his share of bulls, and his cousin Ezekiel Mitchell was carving out his own space in the professional ranks. Together, the two young men pushed each other, feeding off each other's wins and refusing to accept mediocrity. It wasn't just competition. It was a shared dream, and for Ouncie, it was becoming reality. By 2019, he'd earned his spot in the PBR World Finals, a stage that separated the good from the great. And yet, as every rider knows, 8 seconds is only a fraction of the day. What happens in the hours between the roar of the crowd and the quiet of a hotel room is where life unfolds, and sometimes unravels. It was in those quieter moments, somewhere along the endless rodeo circuit, that Ouncie met a young woman named LaShawn Denise Bagley. Their connection was never steady, an on-again, off-again relationship built on brief encounters between long stretches apart. Some saw it as casual. Others noticed flashes of jealousy that could ignite without warning. Whatever it wasn't meant to be the center of his life. But on the night of September 11th, 2022, it would become the center of his death. That day had started with the familiar rush of competition, the smell of dust and leather, the murmurs of the crowd building into a roar as the gate swung open. For Ouncie, the rhythm of the arena was as natural as breathing. He was in Salt Lake City to ride, to collect points, and to keep climbing the rankings. Friends and fans had come to see him. His energy was high, his confidence unshaken. No one, not even him, could have guessed that before the sun rose again, he would be lying outside an apartment door, bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds.
A woman wanted for the murder of a Houston area professional bull rider has been arrested in Fort Bend County. Law enforcement took 22-year-old LaShawn Denise Bagley into custody on January 3rd on a murder warrant after she left Utah during the investigation into the shooting death of 27-year-old Demetrius Allen, better known as Ouncie Mitchell.
Keith, Salt Lake City police arresting LaShawn Denise Bagley shortly after the incident back in September, but they released her while they continued their investigation. That's when she left Utah.
Salt Lake City police said Bagley was initially arrested after the incident, but was released while detectives continued to investigate. And that's when she left Salt Lake City. She was arrested in Fort Bend County on a fugitive warrant January 3rd. The family feeling closer to justice as they come to terms with life without Ouncie.
But this is not a story about the end. Not yet. Because to understand how that night spiraled into tragedy, we have to step back into the arenas of his childhood, the family who raised him, and the choices that brought two lives together on a collision course neither could escape. Before there was the roar of the crowd or the flash of arena spotlights, there was a little boy in Texas with a hand-me-down cowboy hat and a rope that was far too big for him. Demetrius Omar Latif Allen didn't just grow up around the rodeo. He grew up in it. His earliest memories weren't of playgrounds or cartoons. They were of the smell of horses, the creak of leather saddles, and the sound of boots crunching in the dirt at sunrise. His father was a man shaped by the land, a working cowboy whose calloused hands told the story of long days under a hot sun. He wasn't one for long speeches, but when he spoke, it stuck. His lessons were simple. Respect the animal. Respect your word. Outwork everyone. For young Demetrius, Ouncie as the family called him, those words became a compass. At just 2 years old, his mother signed him up for mutton busting, a junior event where kids ride sheep instead of bulls. It might have been a novelty for some. He rode well that day, controlled and composed, earning cheers from the crowd and nods of respect from fellow competitors. Family and friends in attendance saw him smiling afterward, soaking in the moment. On the surface, it was a day without problems, a victory in more ways than one. But away from the arena lights, there was a shadow trailing the celebration. That evening, Ouncie met up with LaShawn Denise Bagley, the woman he had been involved with off and on for some time, and another woman. The three decided to go to a club in downtown Salt Lake City. The music was loud, the drinks kept coming, and the energy in the room shifted with the night. But what began as a casual night out quickly took a turn. Witnesses later recalled that Bagley appeared irritated when she noticed Ouncie showing interest in the other woman at their table. It might have been nothing to most people, a fleeting glance, a short conversation. But for Bagley, it became a spark in dry grass. She left the club abruptly, heading toward the parking garage. It wasn't a direct confrontation. She didn't yell or cause a scene inside the club. Instead, she told Ouncie she was leaving and that he should pick up his belongings from her apartment before she returned. The implication was clear. Whatever was between them had just taken another sharp turn. As she left in her car, witnesses said she came dangerously close to hitting him in the process. For Ouncie, the decision was straightforward. He needed his things, the gear, clothes, and personal items he had left at her place, before moving on to his next rodeo. He and the other woman ordered a rideshare to Bagley's apartment. The plan, at least in his mind, was simple: collect his belongings and leave without further drama. The streets were quiet when they arrived. The building was still, its exterior dimly lit. He knocked on the door. No answer. He called her phone. No answer. Text messages went unread. Through the blinds, however, they caught movement. Bagley was inside. Ouncie stepped toward the sliding glass balcony door, possibly to get her attention, possibly just to make it clear that he was there only to retrieve his possessions. It was in that moment, that small, quiet moment, that the night took an irreversible turn. From inside, Bagley raised a firearm and opened fire. 7 rounds tore through the door, striking Ouncie multiple times. The woman who had accompanied him screamed into the phone to a 911 dispatcher, panicked and almost incoherent. She shot him. She opened the door and shot him. The shots echoed through the complex. Neighbors later recalled hearing the gunfire, but not understanding what had just happened until sirens filled the night air. By the time officers arrived, Ouncie was lying outside, gravely wounded. He was rushed to the hospital, but his injuries were too severe. Earlier that day, he had been in the spotlight, competing for points and glory. Hours later, he was another casualty in a city street, the dust from the arena replaced by the sterile lights of an emergency room. For those who had been at the rodeo just hours before, the news was impossible to process. One moment, they had been cheering his name. The next, they were learning of his death through phone calls and social media posts. The shift was brutal, leaving a gaping space where a vibrant life had been. When Salt Lake City police arrived at the apartment complex that night, the scene was tense and chaotic. Officers quickly secured the area, pushing onlookers back while paramedics worked frantically over Demetrius Ouncie Mitchell. Despite the urgent rush to the hospital, the damage from the gunshot wounds was catastrophic. Within hours, doctors pronounced him dead. Detectives began piecing together the events, starting with the frantic 911 call made by the woman who had accompanied Ouncie. Her voice on the recording was desperate, almost breaking as she repeated the same words. She shot him. She just opened the door and shot him. Inside the apartment, officers found LaShawn Denise Bagley. She was taken into custody and initially charged with murder and felony discharge of a firearm. For Ouncie's family, the arrest felt like the first step toward justice, a tangible response to a senseless act. They believed the case was clear-cut.
Yeah, this is a small rodeo venue here in the Fresno area of Fort Bend County, where I'm told Demetrius Allen learned to ride bulls. He was known as Ouncie Mitchell on the professional circuit, where his family says he was living his dream. Horses graze on property where generations of a Fresno, Texas family have learned to love cowboy life.
For Ouncie Mitchell out of Houston, Texas.
Including Demetrius Allen, a successful pro bull rider known professionally as Ouncie Mitchell.
Well, he took up after his dad. His daddy was a bull rider.
His mother described feeling robbed, not just of her son's life, but of the justice she had hoped would honor it. Friends, fellow riders, and fans expressed their outrage online, calling the decision a failure of the system. Many rejected the notion that this was self-defense, insisting that it was the result of jealousy and anger, not fear. The ruling closed the case legally, but in the court of public opinion, the debate was far from over. Some supported the decision as a correct application of the law. Others saw it as proof that legal protections can be manipulated to excuse deadly actions. As Bagley walked free, Ouncie's number was retired at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, a quiet, solemn tribute to the man who never got the chance to ride there.
And a Utah judge dismissed the murder charge against a woman accused of killing a professional bull rider here in Salt Lake City. Now, the judge ruled Wednesday 23-year-old LaShawn Denise Bagley was legally justified when she killed Demetrius Allen, also known by his fans as Ouncie Mitchell. The court ruled the state didn't present clear and convincing evidence that this was murder and ordered the case dismissed. So we spoke with Clayton Sims, a criminal justice attorney, more about the case.
So you don't have to wait till you're attacked. If an attack is imminent, if you believe that you are threatened, you can strike the first blow. You can shoot someone if you think that you were going to suffer injury. So it had to be the type of threat that was imminent.
All right. Now, Sim also says that in Utah, you have the right to protection in your own space and the right to defend yourself, especially in your own home. He says that's protected by law. Sims also says that yesterday the case was dismissed with prejudice. So that means the case cannot be refiled unless the state appeals the judge's decision.
His family vowed to keep his memory alive, honoring his legacy in the arenas where he had made his mark. But for them, one truth would never change. Demetrius Ouncie Mitchell had spent his life risking it all in the arena. Yet it wasn't the bull that ended his story. It was a bullet fired by someone who once claimed to care for him, and no legal ruling could ever make sense of that. When the gavel came down for the final time, and the words, "case dismissed with prejudice," echoed in the courtroom, a chapter closed for the legal system. But for the people who loved Demetrius Ouncie Mitchell, the wound was torn open all over again. In the days following the ruling, grief turned into a heavy silence in his family's homes. His mother, Lakita, tried to process the reality that there would be no trial, no jury, no verdict to validate the pain she felt. For her, the fight had never been about revenge. It was about the belief that actions have consequences, and that her son's life deserved recognition beyond a legal technicality. At rodeo arenas across the country, the news spread quickly. Bull riders are a tight-knit community, competitors in the ring, but brothers and sisters outside of it. Many of them had ridden alongside Ouncie, shared long drives between events, swapped stories about injuries, near misses, and dreams for the next season. His absence wasn't just noticed, it was felt. At the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, officials quietly retired the number Ouncie would have worn that year. No big announcement, no lengthy speech, just an empty space where his presence should have been. For those who knew him, it was the perfect tribute. Understated, respectful, and deeply personal. His cousin Ezekiel, who had spent years pushing him toward greatness, struggled to find the words. In private conversations, he talked about the drives they'd taken together, the times they'd laughed so hard their ribs ached, and how every time Ouncie nodded his head in the chute, it was like watching someone born for that exact moment. "This is my year," Ouncie had said not long before his death. Ezekiel now carried those words like a promise he intended to keep alive in his own career. But beyond the tributes and memorials, the case left an unsettling mark. In forums, comment sections, and community gatherings, the debate raged on. Supporters of the ruling pointed to the law. Self-defense statutes are written to protect individuals in their own homes. Critics countered that the law had been stretched beyond reason, used to justify the death of an unarmed man, simply trying to collect his belongings. For Ouncie's daughter, Nyla, the loss was far more personal than any legal debate. She was only 5 when she lost her father, too young to understand court rulings or the intricacies of self-defense law. What she would carry instead were the memories her family preserved for her. Fishing trips, FaceTime calls from the road, and the way her dad always made her feel like she was the center of his world. Time moved forward, as it always does, but the people closest to Ouncie refused to let his name fade into the background. His story was told at the Bill Pickett Invitational Rodeo, in church services, and around kitchen tables. Each retelling carried the same unshakable truth. He had built a life on discipline, respect, and fearlessness, only to have it taken in a moment that no one could truly make sense of. In the end, the legacy of Demetrius Ouncie Mitchell is one of both inspiration and caution. His rise from a determined Texas kid to a world-ranked bull rider proves what relentless work and faith can achieve. But his death, and the ruling that followed, stands as a stark reminder of how fragile life can be, and how justice can look very different depending on which side of the courtroom you're standing on. For the bull riding world, he will always be remembered for the way he gripped the rope, the calm in his eyes before the gate swung open, and the way he made 8 seconds feel like forever. For his family, his friends, and his daughter, he will always be remembered simply as Ouncie, the son, cousin, friend, and father who loved deeply, rode fearlessly, and left far too soon. And while the law has spoken its final word, the people who knew him best carry their own verdict. He deserved better.